Thank you. The big challenge is, how do I follow a story like Rich with Joy Inc., which is an organization specifically designed to do what it does, with my stories about organizations that were specifically designed to do something else and now exist purely to resist the kind of change that we as Scrum Masters and coaches are hired to do. So mine is going to be the antithesis of Rich's. If I were writing a book, I would be calling it Predictable Agile Delivery, because what I suspect is that type of organizations that the size that I'm talking about, what they really, really want is predictability. They need to be able to plan for the future, because you know what? That's how they've always worked, and that bit isn't going to change. So we're going to talk about just that, predictable agile delivery. We're going to describe the role of the manager. There's just 3 strategies that large organization managers need to look at, and then we'll touch on what it's like at the very, very top, and how we as coaches and Scrum Masters and Agilists, how we can influence that. So my pedigree, I'm a developer by background, business analyst, tester, all the rest of it. If you come to London, you do not anymore need to buy an Oyster card, a prepaid card. You can pay with your bank-issued card. So I'm the architect of that. Pretty proud achievement. Really happy about that. We did it all agile. We did it by the book Scrum, but it was a new team. We weren't changing anything. We just came in, we did it right, and it was lovely, and everybody bought it. That's very different to changing a mindset. So let's talk about the context, first of all. These are all the bad things. These are all the things that we deal with, and I'm sure you've all encountered this. Scrum and Agile, very, very good at showing you what sucks in an organization. It will show you all the problems really well, okay? How many of you are working with globally distributed teams, non-collocated teams? Okay. It's easy, isn't it? Different time zones? Yeah? Yeah? Asia and the US never cross, you know. So this is really, really difficult. Large organizations develop this idea of matrix management, functional and entity reporting, regional and functional, right? And it doesn't work at the best of times, and yet we all follow the line because that's the way that the organization hierarchy is constructed. Then, of course, being large organizations, we have these initiatives. Sometimes they're called strategies. They're not really strategies, they're just initiatives. But because they're not joined up, they tend to compete with each other. So projects compete for resources. Everything's built around plans because, you know, it's a large organization. You have to get your $5 million budget or your $250 million budget. You have to get that in advance. Right? So these plans are really, really important. And then, of course, a lot of the people that are at senior level, the most senior levels, they've never been there and done this in the same way that you guys have. They've never seen and experienced how an agile project works. They've never folded up pieces of paper and put them in a grid to see how much you can get into a confined space. And they have this very, very high perspective as well, where what they are able to see is kind of filtered to suit what their reports think they need to hear. Okay. And then finally, the organization itself has developed an organizational DNA. It's evolved this DNA that protects itself by resisting change. And that is its inherent value. It's got a lot of value just by resisting change. So a lot of these organizations, if they're a large organization today, they've probably grown up, they've probably become large through scaling a component model. Lots of different components, lots of different sub-machines or processes, all working semi-independently, but then crossing with each other in some really, really complicated manner that nobody quite understands, all right? So you've got this very, very big, complicated machine, and then for each component, what we've got is a manager who reports upwards and is constrained upwards. Because the manager who's responsible for that process, actually I have a detailed slide, the manager who's responsible for that process is constrained by the costs and the delivery. They're always judged by that, but they're also responsible for what goes on inside. That's why we call them middle managers. Okay? And they occupy a unique position that makes them the key to all of our transformations. They have a little bit of influence moving upwards, and they have a lot of influence here. So these are the people that are always the key to agile transformation. So how these machine organizations have built up, you're very familiar with it. People at the very top decide where the ship's going to go. People at the bottom do the work, that's us. And then managers in the middle are responsible for this managing component. And they also prevent these people needing to speak to these people, all right? Because we're hierarchy, we're rank, it matters a lot. What's happened, of course, in the information era, or the internet era, if you like, is that everything has shifted. Now it's... I hate animations, don't you? Now it's machines that actually do the work, and we're the smart people that have got all of the information in our head, and what sort of stuff that we're paid to do now is thinking and understanding and probing and validating solutions. That's a very different sort of thing. That's different from being a pea farmer, where the more land you've got and the more pea seeds you sow, the more money you make. And yet the machine model is controlled by the thinking that says, if I buy more land and plant more seeds, I make more money. And yet here's this problem, is this bit here, these programmers, these problem-solving people, this stuff does not scale. So where does that leave managers? And indeed, it's a good question. It's probably why you're here. So the first thing to do is understand that we're not going to do this in a predictable manner. And by the way, if you want to read more about that, is Taleb. This is Taleb, and he calls it non-linearity, or the linearity misconception. So I spoke to the people that are sponsoring these agile transformations, and I asked them, what is it that you want? And they all told me, without a doubt, no hesitation, what we want is agile delivery. And I said, what does that mean? And they go, it means we want to see stuff delivered in weeks, not months, and not years. Oh, and we want to be able to change our minds about what's delivered. All right, so that's what agile means to you. So that's fine. They also want people off their backs. They want their stakeholders to be happy, particularly their customers. And they also, in some cases, want fewer bugs, fewer escaped defects. Okay, so that's fine. So along we come with Agile and our systems thinking and Scrum values and Lean values and principles and all the rest of it, and we go, great, we can deliver all the things that you want. Here's a set of values. This works for us. We're engineers. We've solved the problem. We solved the wrong problem. That wasn't the problem he wanted to solve. Does anybody know who this is, by the way? This is J.P. Morgan. Okay? So the problem that these machine owners want to solve is not how to build better software so much as how to make more money, because they care about money more than they care about the values that we're trying to give them. So whenever we start our conversations with, well, the Agile Manifesto says this, and here are the Agile values, and here are the Agile principles, we're speaking the wrong language. The context is wrong. It can work in your team, and I'll often start a team, even a team of managers, with what are your values? What do you guys value? Understand that. But it's very hard to sell that to the business, because fundamentally their values, and I'm talking about large organizations, I'm not talking about Joy Inc. You can see that the values have changed there. But in these large organizations, the values tend to be like this. So what they need, it turns out, is this predictability. Okay? And we've got to be able to satisfy that need. All of these constraints, I would suggest, are beyond your sphere of influence. Okay? So we can't change them. So we don't try to change them. But what we do is we inspire, educate, help our managers to minimize the impact of these constraints on our teams who are trying to do the right thing. And all of the Agile and Scrum training, all of the stuff that we as Scrum Masters and coaches do naturally, that is the right thing, and we know that, and we get good buy-in from the team members. So our role is also to help these managers understand how they can facilitate that and how they play a big part in it. So the way I've described it, and this is kind of what I teach to managers or share with managers, there's just three things that they need to think about. And the first one is very peculiar to large organizations. See, in large organizations, if you've got somebody on your team that's not very good, what do you do with them? Move them. Yeah? Different to a startup, isn't it? If you're a startup, you've got somebody that's not very good, you get rid of them. You can't afford to keep them. But in large organizations, we don't like to fire people. So we move them to somebody else's team. So you've probably inherited a few of those as well. So what we have in these teams is we have competency problems. We might have a lack of business analysis. Maybe nobody is writing user stories with acceptance criteria. Maybe they're not writing user stories. Maybe they're writing stories, but they never understand why they're doing it. So they're unable to calculate a business value and therefore spend a lot of time and investment building stuff that's never going to be used, which I think Rich touched on earlier. So this is very, very common in these large organizations. So the first thing that I'm asking managers to do is just to think about competence. And of course, if they've made that step of coming to a workshop on the role of the manager, that's fantastic, because they're interested in improving their own competence. And another big thing for managers in terms of competence is communication skills. Okay, Judith Glaser, there's a good book by Judith Glaser, which she calls Conversational Intelligence. And again, it just sets up a really easy three-step formula for engaging, sharing needs, and then moving towards a shared outcome. So these are all things that are available to managers, but probably because they're doing so much firefighting and they're so overburdened, they haven't had time to look at. So we can help with that. The next one that we ask managers to do is to become responsible for leading the collaboration. If you're a manager, the chances are you're better connected than many of your team members. So you're in a better place to set up the meetings and maybe join the meetings, facilitate the meetings with the stakeholders. So how many of you work in a compliance-dominated industry? Banking, pharmaceutical, finance, any of that sort of stuff? Yeah. So developers tend to forget that they need to speak to compliance people. They forget that they need to speak to audit people. This is just part of your requirements gathering. But they tend not to do that because they've got a trader saying, I want this feature, and that trader's shouting very loudly. Yeah? So the collaboration becomes the responsibility of the manager. And then the other thing that we make managers responsible for is making sure that the work of the team has been prioritized. Notice I don't say that they do the prioritization, because very often you do want that prioritization to happen at a different level, very often globally. So they might be a local manager of a team, but the prioritization decisions have to be global. And again, in a large organization, especially these with these matrix cultures, you've got a lot of customers. And each of those customers comes along and they've got money because they run projects or they manage something. So each one of those comes along with their $1 million budgets and they go, great, here's $1 million. I want $1 million worth of value to come out of this. And you go, well, there's a little overhead to running the team. We have to pay for the managers and we have to pay for the testers, and there's a bit of inefficiency with our locations and so on. So you can't really expect 100% value flow efficiency, you see? So they go, no, you're right, okay, and you need to improve some things, and you need to learn, yeah, okay, good. So we'll allow 20% of your time so that you guys can do that. So I want $800,000 worth of value for my $1 million. And you go, yeah, except there's 9 other ones like you that we're dealing with, and you're all competing for these same very, very precious resources. So what you might get is something closer to 20 or 30%. And we're not very effective at what we do because we have to attend all these other meetings with all these other people. And you know, life is difficult and we're firefighting, so maybe our flow efficiency is down as low as, I don't know, pick a number, 20%, 15, 10, doesn't matter. So what you might get for your $1 million worth is maybe 10% value, realistically, because we're not a very efficient process. And that's the reality. Now, that's a difficult story to tell, and nobody's going to buy it until you show it, until you actually make that visible, all right? So that goes back to this competence, is what we ask managers to do is to help their teams make transparent their process, good or bad, efficient or not. But let's just see it. And it could be as simple as a Kanban board. It could be that. It could be as simple as a story map with ticks going off so that everybody's able to see this is what the software development release process testing looks like. So, and I'm sure we'll circulate the deck a little bit later on. So here are some ideas for you just to think about later on. I love this idea, the collaboration with managers. They have these little wormholes through the organization. They have this sort of network of contacts, typically outside of their normal work because they used to work in different places. They also need to do this, and we encourage managers to do this, especially senior managers. We want them to kind of make sense of their organization, literally take out time in their day, put it in Outlook and block time to be able to think about what's happened and what's going to happen next. And you know, if you've got back-to-back meetings, that's really, really hard to do. So that's an easy conversation with a senior manager to say, let's make sure we've got this time in the diary. Do you believe that it's valuable? Do you agree it's valuable? Yes, okay. Are we doing it? And again, I'm thinking about Rich. He did this. It's clear that as the CEO, he describes the purpose of the organization all the time. Now, you might not be able to say that because you're not in a position to do it, but you can ask that question. You can go to the most senior manager, the most senior stakeholder you can, and ask that question. Ask, what is our purpose? And if you get a convincing answer, then encourage that person to spread that and talk about that often. Because a lot of team workers, a lot of people in these organizations, they've lost the sense of purpose. They're not sure the direction that we're going. How many of you are working with teams that have, in their development process, have project managers involved? Yeah. So the project managers are there to make sure that everything goes according to plan. It's got to be predictable. And of course, nothing ever goes to plan, and we then spend most of our effort and our resources are going into trying to get it back onto the plan. So one of the things that a manager needs to be able to do is to work with the project managers that are associated with the team to understand or to at least resolve the conflicts of roles that exists. Yeah, so it's back to the prioritization. Project managers probably shouldn't be doing prioritization. And that's within the gift of the manager to understand. Also this, large companies love their performance goals, personal performance goals. What are we rewarding people for? What sort of behaviors are we rewarding them for? If we're supposed to be a team, and I don't by any means suggest everybody has to work as a team, but if we're supposed to be a team, and certainly if you're using Scrum, you have to be a team, then are the personal performance goals aligned to personal performance or team performance? So let's have a think at that. And again, it's the manager that's able to influence that. Let's talk a little bit about scary senior managers. Any C-level execs in the room? Nobody's prepared to admit it, are they? So typically what we see at the most senior level is some big ideas. You sure there's no senior level execs in the room? So they have these big ideas. They tend to be quite aspirational. They're non-specific. So you see lots of posters around the organization that says, oh, we must do, the 3 pillars or the 4 balls or whatever it is that month, okay? And of course that will change every quarter or so on. There's nothing wrong with any of these. It's just that they're pretty much unattainable. And because they're a bit aspirational, there's no inspiration behind them. And if the leaders aren't telling us the purpose of the organization and how we're going to get there, then they're completely detached from anything else. It's not a joined up message by any means. And not only that, it turns out that our most senior managers, even C-suite executives, turns out that they've got their own constraints. So I'm working in a global organization. There are 250,000 people in it. My CIO, okay, we don't have a CEO in our section, but our CIO is responsible for 7,000 people. Let's say approximately 1,500 of those are managers. He reports to a global, across the business, CIO, who's responsible for 40,000 people, who reports to his CIO or CEO, who's responsible for the 225,000 people. They all have constraints. The guy at the very, very top, he's constrained by the street, by the stock market. So his constraints are quarterly deliverables and quarterly results. So you're never, ever going to get to a stage where you can resolve all of the inherent flaws in the organization. You'll never do that unless you're lucky enough to start your own organization and design it fit exactly right for the purpose. So we always deal with this, and we have to work inside of the constraints. So typical story here, I saw one of these posters. I went along to the most senior manager I could and said, okay, so I've got a situation. I've got 2 hours left of my day. I can either deliver something, I can improve my work, or I can fix some bugs in the stuff that I'm working on. Which would you like me to do? They're all important. Okay, I've got 2 hours, and I've got 1 hour and 58 minutes left. Which one would you like me to do? Well, you probably can't do anything efficiency, so I think you should concentrate on delivery and quality. Okay, I've now got 1 hour and 55 minutes. You can choose one thing. Anyway, this went on, and in the end, he said quality. He said, I want your stuff to be bug-free. I said, now, are you sure that that's what you want? Because I'm going to go and tell your 300 people, this is a different organization, I can tell your 300 people that that is their number one priority. Yes. Great. Great. It was so great that we went back and we came up with, let's have bug fixing day. And we got T-shirts and everything with people bashing bugs. And we spent a day where nobody did anything else other than bashing bugs and reducing the backlog of bugs. So being able to reduce that and focus on something specific, what a difference it made. So we have to help our senior colleagues, we have to help them with this to make some of this stuff absolutely real. We have to overcome the reality that most people want to keep their jobs. Most people are very scared of losing their jobs. So instead of telling their senior managers the truth, they tell them something that approximates to some of the nicer parts of what might broadly be correct at some time in the future. You develop a sixth sense for looking at PowerPoints and Excel and asking, is this the to-be state or is this what it actually looks like now? And unfortunately, the answer is very often, this is how it's going to be. So the only thing that we've got, and I really mean this, the only thing that we've got is to be empirical and actually say nothing. Say nothing. So we've made a huge breakthrough in our organization of 7,000 people, is we had just two metrics that were chosen by CIO. And he said, I'm interested in how often you release, and I'm interested in how many incidents those releases cause. Okay, so this is 7,000 people's work. And he was interested in that for about a year. And what we've managed to achieve, I think, 2 months ago, was for the very first time, is we managed to get on the wall data showing incident and release charts. It's the first time any data has ever been allowed on the wall. Right? So that is a major breakthrough in terms of transparency. And I'm fighting now to get Kanban boards. Yes, fighting to get Kanban boards. It's electronic at the moment. Everybody's got Jira and all the tools. Nobody looks at that. I want the real things, or great big TV screens would do. I want everybody to see it when they walk past so they can see how slowly these things move from, they only have 3 columns, to do, in progress, done. They only have those 3 columns. So we can start to make that visible. Bottom line, though, you have to do this. It's a large organization. They want to be predictable. They want to fix their budgets. Bottom line is you have to be able to put a dollar figure on everything, even if you make it up. Even if you go, well, this affects 100 developers. Let's say that they save $100 a day, or $100 a week, or $100 a month. Whatever it doesn't matter. Put a figure on it, and it gets taken seriously because it makes sense. And then remember this, these guys cannot do anything at scale. They can't be involved in all of the meetings. They can't see everything that's going on. So there is always going to be a trust network, and it'll always be the case that the trust network goes through, I trust you, I trust you, I trust you. So it will always be that, and that actually is the only way that you can scale these non-linear processes that we do. And finally, I think it's finally, I love this picture. So Hans Rosling, some of you might remember him. He was the Swedish scientist that used to do those fantastic figures and moving stuff. Mindthegap.org. Go along to his site. It's really interesting. It's all about population stuff. So this is him talking about the difference that this is poverty, worldwide poverty, the difference that earning $1 a day makes and earning $10 a day. And you can see that crosses the extreme poverty line. And the point that he's making is that when we stand up there from our Western point of view, earning $100 a day or more, we don't see that height difference. And it's the same is true of these senior managers. They don't see the difference that it makes in having, in this case, in having a bicycle to get your water, or a bicycle to take your daughter to school. And for our teams, they're unaware of the difference that it makes of having a 30-minute retrospective once a week. They are unaware of how important that is, because they've never experienced it. Remember that. They've never experienced it. So they don't know what that ability to reflect and improve, what difference that can make. They don't know the difference that it makes of having a map, I don't mean that you have to do Kanban, but a Kanban view of your process end to end. This is how we convert from an idea into working software. They are unaware of these simple steps. So my suggestion for you guys is to take away from here this idea that baby steps, really baby steps, and informing upwards is what's going to bring about the change in the culture that you need. Remember, you can't change culture. You change culture every day. Think about whether you're helping your managers to do one of two things: remove a blocker or develop an enabler. And they're doing it within those three bands: competency, collaboration, and prioritization. And then the other one to do is this, and it's counterintuitive: celebrate the culture of the organization. Good or bad, moral, immoral, wrong, it doesn't matter. That is the culture of the organization. And the type of agile that's going to really make a difference for them is going to be their own agile with their own value systems and their own behaviors and their people. And they will come to that. They'll develop it. It might take a long time. So they're always in transition. And that really is the role of the manager, is to help that. And our role as the coach, as a scrum master, is to help the managers help that happen. And I leave you with that thought. Thank you very much. Thank you.